Do. Hello. Oh, hi. Thank you
Hello.
for participating in our webinar this evening. I am, oh, wait a minute. I am Claudia Loomis. Yep. Okay. Hi. I was just checking to see if people were here. Everybody's loading on. Thanks. Hello. Thank you for participating in our webinar this evening. I'm Claudia Loomis, Cherrybrook and CB Pet Markets Pack Leader. It's my pleasure to be your moderator. Does your pet need to go on a diet? This is the important question we are going to explore in our webinar tonight with Josh Wasserman, Farmina Pet Foods Marketing Manager. Josh is going to walk us through many of the facts and factors to consider when considering what is a healthy weight for our pets and how to get them and keep them there. Josh has worked at Farmina for over 5 years, and in his role, he has the unique opportunity to work closely with the Farmina veterinary and scientific team. And he has extensive education and animal nutrition and he has extensive education in animal nutrition and pet health. As many of you know, Farmina is a European pet food company, and their pet food is available globally. This has afforded Josh the opportunity to work with animal nutrition and pet health professionals worldwide, and together they have developed nutrition training for Farmina employees, their premier retail partners, of which Cherrybrook is proud to be one, and their customers. Fair warning, this presentation will have some math. So before we begin, there's a bit of housekeeping. This will be an interactive webinar, and we will be asking you all to answer a few poll questions as we go along. Your answers will help Josh focus the discussion. The poll questions will appear on the right side of your screen. Just click on the answer. The formal presentation will take about 45 minutes, and there will be time at the end of the presentation to answer your specific questions. You do not need to wait until the end of the presentation to type your questions into the chat bar. You can type them at any time during the presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and everyone will receive an email with a link to the recording within 24 hours. If we do not get to answer your specific questions, I welcome you to email us directly, and we will get your questions answered. I'm going to ask our first poll question just to get warmed up. And it's a little contest between our store managers. Which Cherrybrook store do you call home? If you can answer the question, we'll get started. I'm going to give everybody a little bit of time to answer when the questions are asked. Is it Bedminster, Washington, Garwood, Livingston, or our newest CB Pet Market location in Clinton? Or do you shop online or at our shows? Okay. Thank you, guys. Josh, please get the party started and share a bit about yourself, Farmina, and all you have learned and will share with us about healthy weight management.
Perfect. I want to say thank you again for everyone coming to the webinar, as well as Claudia and the rest of the CB and Cherrybrook Pet Market team, giving us this opportunity to speak with you guys. This, I think, is one of the most important questions and topics that always comes up, and it can be a little confusing, and I hope to clarify that and help each of you make sure that your pet is at their proper and ideal weight. And we'll go step by step exactly how to do that and ensure that your pet could live the healthiest and happiest life possible. So as Claudia mentioned, I am the marketing manager for Farmina Pet Foods here in North America. And I've been with Farmina for a little over 5 years. So during that time, I've got to work with our different nutritionists and veterinarian teams to learn about animal nutrition and really be able to work with them to take these complicated topics and this evolving science and really be able to bring it down into ways that pet parents such as yourselves could understand and ensure that you are doing everything possible to make the best and healthiest decisions for your pet.
Before you go on about
Yep.
Farmina, let's just see if the population of our audience, if we are dog owners, cat owners, or both. Guys, if you wouldn't mind taking a moment and letting us know if you have dogs or cats or both. Okay. 60% of our participants this evening have dogs, 30% have both dogs and cats, and 6% are solely cats. Continue.
Great. I'm glad to see that we have a good mix of both cat and dog pet parents, because this is a important topic that really faces both the cat and dog community. So I'm really glad to see that we have a good mix. So for those that aren't too familiar with Farmina, we are a family-owned and operated company. So we've been in the food production for pets for over 50 years. Our history dates back with a family-owned, with the current owner's father starting the company and taking a different approach than a lot of other companies out there. So, one thing that we do that's a little bit different, or not every manufacturer currently does, is produce all of their own foods. This is both dry foods and our wet foods. So as Claudia mentioned, we are operating worldwide. So our products can be found in more than 60 different countries, and we have currently 4 different production facilities. All of our dry food is currently produced in our Italy facility, and all of our wet food is produced in our Serbian facility, which is very close to Italy, using those exact same Italian and French suppliers, just produced over in that country. The other thing that really separates Farmina from a lot of companies is the amount we invest and our passion for the scientific research. So at Farmina, we have an international formulation team. So we have a veterinarian that has a PhD and master's degree in animal nutrition. We have 5 additional veterinarians, one with a specialized focus on nutrition. We have 6 team members with master's degrees in animal feed technology and 3 team members with bachelor degrees in food technology. And that's just part of our formulation team. So in addition, our entire nutrition team is comprised of quality control laboratory technicians. So these are chemists, biochemists, biologists, and biotechnologists, among other feed professionals. So they are checking every single raw ingredient as it comes to our production facilities before any are actually received in, as well as testing all of our products before they ship out to our partners throughout the world. In addition, we have 20 full-time employed veterinarians that are in various managerial roles, and over 80 veterinarians throughout the world that are providing field support. So they're supporting our teams, our retail partners, and in some instances, also final customers with any support and questions they might have. So a lot of the research that we've done, we're fortunate enough to have been published in different international journals. One in particular is the British Journal of Nutrition, which is out of Cambridge University. The way that we produce our research or do our research is with partnered universities throughout the world. We've entered into a partnership with Cornell University here in North America, and we look forward to doing more and more research with them as our partner. So we're going to get into proper feeding and weight management. But before we do so, we have one more poll question.
Okay, what we're going to ask now is, when was the last time you had your pet's weight checked? A month ago? 6 months ago? About a year ago? So far it's 50-50, a month ago, 6 months ago. Okay. Okay, 66% of our participants this evening about a month ago, 22% about 6 months ago, and 11% about a year ago.
That's so great to hear. So many pet parents that we talk with haven't gotten their pets weighed regularly. If you're one of those amongst the fold, you could bring your pet to any CB Pet Market or Cherrybrook store and weigh your pet right there. Knowing your pet's proper weight will make the next exercises we go through, or current weight, I should say, will make the next exercises we go through a little bit easier, as well as allow us to calculate what your pet's ideal weight should be. So, what is your pet's ideal body weight? The first thing and the most important thing is to know that every pet is unique. Even those of the same breed can and most likely will have different ideal body weights. So, how do we determine your individual pet's ideal body weight? So, the first thing we do is determine their body condition score. And we're going to learn a little bit about what a body condition score is, as well as how to determine it coming up. Once we have that, we are able to calculate their ideal weight. So, what is a body condition score? It is an estimated amount of fat that is on your pet's body. So, we are able to determine your pet's body condition score through a visual and touch assessment. So, the first thing we want to do is view your pet from above. So, we want to focus on the weight on the waist. It should be noticeable, and your pet's overall shape should be more like an hourglass than an oval. As you'll notice in this photo, there isn't a very visible waistline. So from this assessment so far, I would say this pet is a little bit overweight. Then what we want to do is view from the side. So it's important to make sure that the tummy is tucked up and not hanging down. And then depending on the breed, the last 1 to 2 ribs should be slightly visible. After we've finished the visual assessments, we'll start the touch assessments. We should start at the side and be able and run your hand from the front to the back and be able to distinguish each rib. You should feel a little bit of fat while you're doing it, but you should also be able to make out the outline of each of those ribs. Then what we're going to want to do is touch the base of their tail. So here we're going to evaluate the amount of muscle and fat surrounding the base of the spine and tailbone. It should be distinguishable, but not too sharp. If it is sharp, it might mean that your pet is a little bit underweight and we might need to increase their weight. So who could help calculate what your pet's body condition score is? It can be done by you at home. It's a great way to kind of start and make sure that you're at least to get a general guideline. However, if you're not too sure or need some assistance, you can always bring your pet to your local Cherrybrook or CB Pet Market. You could reach out to a Farmina Pet Health Coach. We offer a free consultation service. Or next time you bring your pet to the vet, make sure that they are doing a body condition score assessment. So now that we've done a visual and touch assessment, we're able to now take that findings and put it to a body condition score. In this case, a visual representation using a scale of 1 to 9. Claudia, I think we have
I'm sorry.
poll. No problem.
Okay. Do I have a poll? Sorry, do I have a poll question?
Yeah, so we were going to see, how can you tell if your pet
Okay.
has a weight issue?
Okay. Sorry about this, guys. How can you tell if your pet has a weight issue? Check how much they weigh. Visual inspection, hands-on inspection, feeling for the ribs and tummy tuck-up. All of the above. Oh, well, everybody was paying better attention than I was. I apologize, everybody. I'm going to end the poll at 100%, all of the above.
Great.
I
I'm glad to know no one fell asleep yet. We haven't gotten to the math, so I'm not surprised. But when we get there, I'm going to go through it nice and slow and make sure everyone understands. So now that we've done the visual and touch assessment, what we want to do is take those findings and figure out, based on this visual representation, of where your pet would fall. So we start at a number 1, which would be too thin. So are there very visible ribs? Can you see the lumbar vertebrae and hip bones? There's no palpable fat, so you can't really feel any fat. There's a very well-defined abdominal shape and waistline. Then you have thin, so easily palpable ribs covered by just a thin layer of fat. When you are looking from above, the waistline is visible. There's a more prominent abdominal curvature. Then we have the ideal weight. So the ribs are just palpable with just a little bit of excess fat. Looking from above, there's a good curve to their waistline in that hourglass that we talked about before. Moving to overweight. So the ribs are covered with an excess amount of fat. When you're looking from above, it's barely visible. There's very little evidence of abdominal curvature. And then getting to obese. So this is, there's high amounts of fat. It's no indentation when it comes to their waistline. And there's going to be even a little bit of drag down at the tummy as well. So if your pet falls in between one of these, that's where your even numbers come from. So if your pet's between too thin and thin, for instance, that would be a 2. Between thin and ideal weight, a 4. Between ideal weight and overweight, a 6. And between overweight and obese, an 8. And the same goes for cats. So we use the same visual representation, the same kind of criteria for cats. So there are also some misleading factors. So for instance, if your pet has long hair, a long coat cat or dog, it's going to make the visual assessment especially a little bit more difficult, make it a little tougher to understand and figure out if there's excess fat or weight, as well as being able to identify the ribs just due to the length of the fur. In addition, muscle. So in this case, a very extreme example, but if you do have a pet that is more active, has a much greater muscle definition, these could also become very misleading when doing a touch assessment. Tougher to determine the difference maybe between the muscles and the fat. On your long hair pet, a tip could be doing a check after a bath. So if you are bathing your dog, most likely, or cat at home, doing a check as they're wet could be beneficial, make it a little easier to do your visual as well as touch assessment. If you do get your pet groomed at a CB Pet Market or Cherrybrook store, having the groomer perform the test or one of the staff members during that process could also be beneficial, so that way you could get a more accurate reading on your pet's body condition score. So now that we have done a visual representation, we've identified what our pet's body condition score is on the chart, on the list of 1 through 9. Now we're able to start calculating what their ideal weight is. So for example, if we have a 35-pound dog with a BCS score of 8, so between overweight and obese, we'll be able to figure out what this pet's ideal weight should be. So the first step is taking your dog's starting BCS and subtract 5. So in this case, the starting BCS is 8. We're going to subtract 5 and get 3. Now that we have that, we're going to multiply that number by 10. So 3 times 10 will be 30. We're going to add 100. So 30 plus 100 equals 130. And then we're going to divide 100 by the result from step 3 and round to 3 digits. So in this case, we'll do 100 divided by 130, 769. Now we will take our dog's current weight, and that's why it's important to know exactly how much your pet weighs today. Again, you could weigh your pet if you haven't done it recently by bringing your pet to any local CB Pet Market or Cherrybrook store and weighing your pet. We'll take that number, 0.769, we'll multiply it in this case by 35 pounds and get 26.9 pounds. So we know that this dog's target or ideal weight is 26.9 pounds. If we do the same example, it's the same exact steps, but with a cat. And in this case, an 11-pound cat with a BCS of 5. So this cat is at their healthy or ideal weight. We'll see that it works out exactly the same. So we'll take our cat starting BCS and subtract 5. So 5 minus 5 equals 0. We will then multiply that number by 10. So 0 times 10 is 0. We will add 100. So 0 plus 100 equals 100. We will divide 100 by the result from step 3 and round to 3 digits. 100 divided by 100 equals 1. And as you guys will probably guess the next step, 1 times 11 pounds equals 11 pounds. So we know that this cat's target and ideal weight is 11 pounds. So even if your pet is at their ideal weight, this calculation does still work. So now that we've calculated their ideal weight, it's important to understand how much to feed.
Okay. So how do you decide how much to feed your pet? I feed based on the feeding recommendations on the bag of pet food. I feed only the amount my pet will eat in 10 minutes once I put his bowl down. And I feed the amount of food my vet has recommended. Okay, I'm going to end the poll, and it is 66% of our participants this evening feed based on the feeding recommendations on the pet food on the bag of pet food. 6%, put the bowl down and then pick it up after 10 minutes, and 26% feed based on vet recommendation.
Perfect. So for those that are feeding based on their vet's recommendation, your vet most likely is doing exactly what we're going to be doing next. So it's the most ideal way because it's the exact amount of food that your pet needs. For those that are feeding based on the feeding guidelines, it's not that you're doing anything wrong, but at times it's not a one size fits all kind of approach. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well, all of the different factors that go into understanding how much to feed your pet. So what we're going to do here, and Farmina, we obviously also have a feeding recommendation on the back of the bag. And if what you're feeding today is anything like Farmina, I know many of our customers do reach out because it can be a little confusing and misleading, because if you look at a certain weight, such as 35 pounds, you might see that you should feed anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 cups of food a day. And, it can be tough if you're not that familiar, maybe you're a new pet owner, knowing, well, where do I fall in that range? So what we're going to be doing next is exactly what we do with all of the different pet parents that reach out to us, understanding, wanting to know exactly how much food they should feed their pet. So as I mentioned before, every pet is unique. So a 35-pound pet, one pet might need to eat lower on the range at the 1.5 cups, or might need to be at the higher end of the range at 2.5 cups. So again, it's important to do this kind of calculation, really understand, are you feeding your pet exactly how much they need to maintain their ideal weight or get to their ideal or target weight? So now that we previously calculated and figured out what each of these pets' ideal weight is, it's important to look at your pet's age, their activity level. Have they been neutered or spayed? Is your pet pregnant or potentially lactating? As well as any medical needs or conditions that might be taking place. So each of these factors will help us discover the exact amount of calories your pet needs to maintain or get down to their target and proper weight. So how do we calculate it? And Things will seem a little confusing on this slide, so I will go slow. And at the end, if you do have any questions, I'm more than happy to jump back here and be able to go through this again with you to kind of clarify anything you might have. So the first thing we want to do is calculate your pet's metabolic weight. So for a dog, what you would do is take your dog's body weight, their current body weight, not their target weight, their current body weight, and do it to the power of 0.75. For cats, we do their body weight in kilograms. Sorry, both cat and dog is in kilograms, and we'll do it to the power of 0.67. Once we figure out their metabolic weight, now we need to calculate their energy requirement. So you have what's called metabolized energy. So how much energy they're getting from the food. And to calculate this, we take K, which is a constant, and we multiply it by the metabolic weight that we calculated in step 1. So for dogs, the K, or the constant, will be typically anywhere in the range of 70 to 130. And this will be based on their age, activity level, current weight, spayed, neutered, pregnant, lactating. For cats, typically their needs will vary a little bit less than dogs. So if you're not entirely sure, you could always use the average of 100. So to figure out your K for your dog, what we're going to want to first do is take a look at this quick chart. So part 1. So in this case, we have, very underweight, a BCS score of 1 at 140, so on and so forth, to a BCS of 90, which is very weight, and a range of 60, which actually goes a little bit below of what I said before of 70 to 130. This is really for your extreme, very overweight cases that hopefully none of us are suffering from today. What you'll notice also is neutered and spayed is at 70, towards the lower end. Well, you might be thinking, well, my pet is neutered, spayed, and they aren't gaining any weight. And that can very well be the case. But if you do have a pet that you've noticed really starts gaining a lot of weight since they've been neutered, spayed, maybe this procedure got done a little bit later in life, and their metabolism really kind of slowed down, that is something you want to take into effect. If you have a younger pet and they're still very active, you haven't really noticed a decrease in activity or in the processing of food by easily gaining weight, you don't necessarily need to jump and say, hey, my pet's neutered, I need to be at 70. From there, what I would really do is kind of look at the other factors, that BCS scores that we talked about earlier, with that ideal weight being at, or maintenance weight at 100. So once we figure out where our pet is in part 1 of the chart, what we're going to want to do is understand, and more so on the dog side than cat, is where they are on the activity side. So part 2. So are they a couch potato? Do they go daily walks and play? Do they have a high level of activity, or are they a working dog? And a working dog isn't just a dog that's maybe out in the field all day working on that sense, but it could be your guide dog, your helper dog, different things like that, where they are mentally going to be much more engaged throughout the day than your typical pet that might spend majority of the day sleeping. So once we figure out where our pet is on part 1 and part 2 of the chart, we're going to calculate the average to get your individual pet's K. So, for example, if we go back to that pet that we talked about earlier that is 35 pounds with a BCS score of 8, so overweight, what we would first do is calculate our pet's metabolic weight. So in this case, to first calculate their weight into kilograms, we would do 35 pounds divided by 2.2. This would get us their kilogram weight, and we would do it to the power of 0.75. If you're not entirely sure on how to calculate something to the power, if you use an iPhone or Android device and you open your calculator and turn it sideways, you should see some extra new functions appear on the screen. So if we do 35 divided by 2.2, click enter, and then go towards the left side of your calculator, you should see a little button that has an X with a small y above it. If you click that button and then do 0.75, it will calculate that result to the power of 0.75, which should get you, based on this example, a metabolic weight of 7.96. So now that we have that calculated, what we're going to do is calculate that energy requirement. So again, if we look at the K, and we do 70, which is overweight with a BCS score of 8. Plus, in this case, I'm saying my pet is a couch potato, so giving an activity score of 80, which resulted in why my pet might be a little bit overweight. 70 plus 80 equals 150. We'll divide that by 2 and get 75. So for my pet, my K, or constant, will be 75. I'm going to multiply that by 7.96 that we calculated in step 1 and calculate that my pet, this dog that's 35 pounds, requires 597 calories or kcals per day. This will help us achieve the dog's target weight of 26.9 pounds. If we look at that same example, but with the cat that is 11 pounds at their healthy weight, BCS score of 5, we go through the same process. So here I would calculate my cat's metabolic weight by doing 11 divided by 2.2. Again, once I get that value, I will click the X with a little Y above it on the calculator, then put in 0.67 and get a metabolic weight of 2.94. Now that I have that, I will take, in this case, a healthy cat. I'm going to use that average that we talked about earlier, or K constant of 100. 100 times 2.94 will show that this cat needs 294 kcals per day to help maintain the cat's ideal or target weight of 11 pounds. So another thing to kind of keep in mind, there are some breed-specific weight and diet requirements. You have some breeds that might require closer monitoring or regular monitoring, such as, beagles and golden retrievers that more easily gain weight than some other breeds. So even though you might calculate how much your pet might need to eat today, it's important to kind of monitor through doing a body condition score check, figuring out their ideal amount to eat, a couple of different times throughout time to ensure that what we're calculating is actually working. Because again, it's not a perfect science. There are different variables that can happen or different physiological changes that might happen to your pet over time that require you to recalibrate how much you're feeding. In addition, you have some breeds that are going to be more active and might require some more calories. This could be your Jack Russell Terrier, a lot of your smaller breeds that have a little bit faster metabolism, or your Border Collies or other working dogs that are going to just have a more natural, higher activity level, might require just a little bit more calories per day. When looking for a brand of food to feed, it's important that you're choosing a company or a product or brand that has a full range of diets that could meet all of the different nutritional needs of your pet. This is important because over time, your pet's needs might change as their body and lifestyle changes. So, companies that have diets that are high in protein, low carbohydrate options, low fat, diets that are higher in fiber, which is super ideal for your pets that are overweight and we're trying to get them down to a healthy weight, as fiber will help us feed a similar quantity of food while providing the pet a lower amount of calories. So that way that pet doesn't feel full throughout, or so that way the pet does feel full throughout the day, as well as making sure, any diet you're feeding has been low glycemic index tested, which is important. Because especially with overweight pets, the probability of getting diabetes, as we're also going into diabetes month, which is in November, it's important to kind of know and ensure that your pet is healthy. So Farmina, we are one of those brands. So we have a large variety of products across, grain inclusive, grain-free diets. We have functional diets. So we have, a weight management formula available for both cats and dogs that are going to be higher in fiber, providing, that feeling of being full to your pet while providing lower calories. Super important to have available to get your pet down to that healthy weight where you could then transition to a different type of diet. We have, neutered indoor kind of diets available, as well as other life stage. Senior for dogs is also super important if you've noticed a increase in weight as your pet has increased their age. Another thing to keep in mind when looking at foods is understanding that treats, toppers, and snacks all play into your pet's daily caloric intake. So if your pet needs 600 calories per day, you're feeding an amount of food that's going to give you 600 calories, it's important to know that any toppers, treats, and snacks will increase that amount. So you might need to decrease the amount of actual food you're feeding. For instance, toppers, they might provide over 300 plus calories, depending on how much you're feeding. So again, if you're trying to really get your pet to hit their ideal weight, it's important to kind of keep this in mind and factor how many calories are coming from this into your diet. When you're getting into your snacks, so these could be, on the dog side, your bully sticks, these higher kind of value, let's say, treats or snacks, you're looking at 100 to 250 calories per snack. It's important, especially, that you don't want to necessarily supplement a large amount of your pet's daily calories with snacks. Snacks, unlike your foods and a lot of your toppers, are not going to necessarily be complete diets. So you do want to make sure that 90+% of your pet's daily caloric intake is coming from a complete and balanced diet. So they're getting all of the essential amino acids and nutrients and vitamins and minerals that they need. Then you have your regular treats. So these are typically going to be lower in calories, 5 to 60 calories per treat, depending on the size and the type. These are great. Definitely important, especially when you have a puppy, to find a lower calorie treat, as you're going to be providing a higher quantity of them. For me, and for instance, where I recently got a puppy, I actually used some of our kibble for treat purposes. That way I knew, hey, everything I'm feeding this pet is a complete diet, is not taking away from their other calories or adding to it. I'm actually taking some food, kibble out of their bowl and using that as treats. But depending on how, food sensitive your pet might be in terms of food driven, if you do need to use a treat, it's important to kind of keep that in mind and limit the amount that you're feeding on a daily basis.
Okay. Are we ready for our next poll question?
Yep.
Okay. How often do you feed your pet? Once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day? Wow, the 100%. Oh, we're
some more results coming in.
Yay. Guess we shouldn't be too hasty. Interesting. There might be some young puppies in the audience. Okay. All right. 85% of the participants this evening are feeding their pets twice a day. Once a day, 7%, and 3 times a day, 7%.
This is great because, we recommend for puppies and kittens, especially, is to feed 3 times per day at the very least. It's important because, they're going to have smaller stomachs while still having higher calorie requirements to ensure proper growth. So by minimizing the quantity of food and spreading it out throughout the day, we're making sure that their bodies are able to fully digest, metabolize, and absorb all of the great nutrients coming from the diet. For adults, we still do recommend feeding 2 times per day. We understand, it's not always possible based on kind of schedules and things. So don't feel bad if you are feeding your pet once a day, because again, each pet is unique. My dog in particular, she's more of a grazer, and she feeds or eats majority of her food later at night. So, in the morning, if I put down a fresh bowl of food, it might sit there all day. So even as hard as I might try to get her to space out how much she's eating, it becomes a little bit more difficult. Again, every pet is unique, so it will definitely vary. But general guidelines, we do recommend, at least 3 times per day for puppies, kittens, twice a day for adults. If you have, an adult that gobbles down the food instantly, maybe a beagle, not to pick on beagles, but they're very food driven. If they do clear the bowl right away and you are able to maybe space it out 3 times per day, that could be a great option, again, to make sure that they are able to fully digest and absorb everything and don't end up regurgitating the food due to the speed in which they have eaten it. If you do also have a very quick eater, something I do recommend is getting a slow feeding bowl, something you could pick up at your local CB Pet Market or Cherrybrook store. This will help slow down your pet, ensure that they are taking their time eating. This will help minimize any kind of choking risk or hazard, as well as regurgitation, where they've eaten too fast and it all comes up and you see those solid pieces in their food. So what are your next steps? So now that we've kind of gone through all of this, you can connect with your local Cherrybrook Farmina authorized nutrition center. You could also connect with a Farmina pet health coach. So as I mentioned earlier, it's a complimentary service we provide to all pet parents, whether you're feeding Farmina today or not. And whether you're talking with a Cherrybrook employee or a Farmina pet health coach, together we could help you evaluate your pet's BCS score, help you calculate exactly how much your pet needs to eat, teach you how to proactively monitor your pet's weight as well as other functions throughout the life of their pet, so that way you can make sure your pet is healthy and therefore happy, as well as answer any other nutrition questions you have. I know there's a lot of complicated questions. More and more things are kind of being shared. Pet parents like yourselves are becoming more and more educated, which is amazing. And if you do ever need guidance, we are here to assist. If you are interested, you can download the My Farmina app. It's a great way for you to book an appointment with a Farmina pet health coach, upload photos if you need help to calculate your pet's BCS score and can't maybe bring them over to a local Cherrybrook store, especially maybe for a cat that might be a little bit more difficult. And we're more than happy to assist. So at this point, I'd love to turn it over to any questions you guys might have.
Okay. Thank you, Josh. That was very informative, and I know it's a little math heavy.
Yes.
There are a lot of calculations to perform, but if anybody has any questions, you can type them into the chat bar. And I know I had a couple of our customers did email me earlier today. They weren't able to participate in this evening, but they did have some specific questions that I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
One of our customers asked, they heard that it was always better to have their dog be a little underweight than overweight. Do you have any guidance on that?
So I think it also varies a little bit by breed. If you have a breed that's very or more predisposed to easily gaining weight, again, and I apologize in case we have some beagle owners in the audience, but something like a beagle or golden retrievers, labs, different breeds like that are typically going to gain weight a little bit easier. It might make sense to stay a little bit towards if we remember back to that visual representation scale of 1 through 9, staying somewhere between the 4 range, which is going to be between thin and your normal weight. So that way, if you do throw in some extra treats, maybe you go on a walk and give some extra reward, you're not making sure that you're going over that daily calorie intake compared to others. You then have some breeds, that are going to be hard to gain weight. So some of maybe you have a greyhound or a whippet or another breed like that's you're really struggling to get those calories on. In that case, you're going to want a diet that's going to be higher in calories. You might want to keep your pet towards the higher end of that scale, maybe at the 5 or 6 between the normal and the overweight, just to kind of make sure that if there is a change or anything, that pet is in that normal ideal pet weight range. Just like everything, it's always going to be unique to your individual pet, not even breed specifics, more as a general guideline.
Right. My personal experience is I had I have a 5-year-old Samoyed, and I to the vet recently, and she expressed that she felt that he was underweight, and she said you should feed him more. Well, now he's a little overweight because I didn't know what a little more was. And had I had the calculations, had I had the key, I would have understood what a little more would have been and done it appropriately. So now I have to now that I have the key, now I know where I can bring him down, how much less I have to feed him to get him to his ideal weight. Um, um, Tony asked a really good question. He said, "Does the age of the pet have any bearing on how to assess your pet's weight? Like a
No.
puppy or a kitten?"
So the age won't have any bearing on how to assess the weight body condition score. With puppies and kittens, it will always be a little bit trickier because we don't know exactly how big they're going to get. So at the same time, feeding maybe a little bit more to a puppy or kitten might not be end of the world because they are growing. Because again, talking about every pet being unique, you could have a golden retriever that's maybe at their perfect ideal weight of 45, 50 pounds. And then you have another that's at their ideal weight of 60 pounds. And you don't necessarily know when they're a puppy where exactly they're going to fall. So it does take a little bit more close monitoring, especially with the puppy, or kitten, making sure you're doing these checks a little bit more often, do those visual assessments, those touch assessments, make sure that what we're doing is working, make sure that we're recalibrating it. For instance, with Farmina, we have a tool that could send a custom feeding plan. And if we send it to a puppy or kitten parent, it will actually give you on almost a 2-week basis, how much you should be feeding, because the amount you're feeding, there's different growth curves and spikes that happen at these different stages will either go up or down. So with puppies and kittens, it's super tough or it's not, I don't want to say tough. It just does take a little bit more work to kind of monitor and make sure that we are feeding the correct amount of food as their body continues to develop and change.
Okay. Chris asks, "One of my dogs has digestive issues, but prescription diets have too much crap in them." Thank you, Chris. We know that. He does well on the ND quinoa digestive. Any other recommendations?
So first, if the N&D quinoa digestion formula is working, it is a diet that you can feed long term. So there's not necessarily a need to switch off. I do typically recommend, being a little bit more cautious when changing, especially a pet that we know is having some digestive issues. But if you did want to change, I would recommend a diet that is going to be a little bit more limited in ingredients, just because each ingredient could help or could potentially cause some type of issue. So you might want to try one of our skin and coat diets. Those are going to be single protein source. They're going to still be a little bit lower in proteins and fats compared to other diets. If the quinoa digestion formula is not working for your pet, you're still having some issues, we do actually have a line of prescription diets. I think you would find that they're going to be using much higher quality ingredients than you might find on other diets in the market. We have a gastrointestinal formula. It does require a prescription from your veterinarian, but that is something that we'd be more than happy to assist you with if you did need some stronger guidance. For those out there that might have pets that might have slight digestive issues, adding a little bit more fiber to their diet could be beneficial. I know you could stop by your CB Pet Market or Cherrybrook store, buy a can of pumpkin. That's something great that you could add into a kibble or even a wet food that you're feeding as a great way to increase their fiber. You could go with one of our diets in our N&D pumpkin range that includes about 5% of each of the recipes is going to contain pumpkin. That's also great for some of your pets that might have some slight digestive issues, where you're seeing the stool is not quite where it should be. It's between that, let's say, slightly difficult to pick up and easy to pick up kind of phase, not completely runny that you might experience with a more severe digestive issue.
Okay. Lisa asks if the webinar will be shown again tonight or soon. Lisa, everybody who's participating tonight is going to get a, uh, a a link to the recording that you'll be able to watch as often as you want, whenever you want. The recordings will also be on our website and on our YouTube channel as well. They'll be put. They won't hit the YouTube channel for a week or so, but they will be hitting your inbox within 24 hours. So you'll be able to view them, and you can also share them with friends if you wanted to share some of this information with your friends. Mark asked, should we feed our dogs less in the winter due to less activity than in other seasons? That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a great question, and something we help a lot of pet parents with. Yes, but again, it might depend. So, if you have a large decrease in activity, maybe during the summer you guys are doing a mile, 2 mile walk or run on a regular basis, and during the winter it's more limited to small walks around the block to go to the bathroom, limited indoor play, you might want to decrease the amount of food that your pet is eating. What I would recommend is start off the winter at that decreased activity level with feeding the same amount and then doing another assessment. Has your pet gained weight? Have you noticed a increase in or a difficulty in maybe feeling the ribs or seeing their waistline, increase a little bit? And then from there, doing some kind of calculation. Some dogs, on the other hand, might actually have an increase in the winter. You might have huskies or other Nordic breeds that are going to be a little more active, want to play around in the snow, jump, do things where during the summer you can't get them to move because it's too hot out. So it definitely does depend a little bit based on your breed and that activity level, and you might need to make those seasonal adjustments.
Okay. Tony asks, does it matter whether you are feeding dry food or wet food when assessing your dog's weight?
When assessing their weight, it does not make a difference. What is important to understand is more when it comes time to feeding. So, wet food has calories in it, just like dry food. Dry food typically will have more calories than wet food in a similar serving size, just due to kind of how compact, let's say, it is, or nutrient dense kibble might be compared to wet food. But something important is to always look at, okay, what are the total calories my pet needs on a daily basis? And from there, understand, well, how much wet food I might want to feed per day versus how much dry food if you are a mixed food feeder. So something I always recommend is, I think a lot of pet parents, especially those that are feeding a mixed food, is first starting with, well, how much wet food do I want to feed per day? Do I want to feed a full can, half a can, quarter of a can? And then from there, figuring out how many calories are inside that can of food. So every can of food should have the calories per can on the can itself. If not, I'm sure if you go to that manufacturer's website, you should be able to find that information. From there, divide it by how much of the can you want to feed, subtract that from the total amount of calories your pet should be eating on a daily basis, and then do the same thing on the dry food side. So you should be able to find, for instance, if you go to Farmina's website or look at the feeding guide on the bag, you should see how many calories there are per cup. So from there, you're able to calculate exactly how many calories or how much quantity of dry food you need to feed to get the total amount of calories your pet needs on a daily basis. Again, if you are feeding Farmina products, our team's a little bit more well equipped in helping you calculate how much to mix feed. But even if you're not feeding Farmina, feel free to reach out to one of our pet health coaches. I'm sure staff members at CB Pet Market or your local Cherrybrook store will be more than happy as well to help you kind of calculate and figure out exactly how much food you should be feeding of each to help make sure you're feeding the proper amount.
Okay. Um, Karen asks, well, it's a two-part question. My dog is a Corgi mix shepherd, has been on Farmina weight management food for about 1 year. We give him fruit and or vegetables for snacks maybe once a day. He is not losing any weight on the weight management food with exercise and only fruit and veggies for snacks. Any suggestions? He needs to drop 5 pounds.
Yes. So one of the things is understanding how much you're feeding. Are you maybe if you haven't already gotten a Farmina nutritional plan, I think it would be super beneficial. It's
Mhm.
easy way for you to know exactly how much to feed your pet. The other thing, if you're looking just today at the back of the bag of food, and this goes for anyone on the call who's maybe trying to get their pet to an ideal weight, whether you're feeding Farmina or not, if you're just looking at the back of the bag, you're not doing the calculations, anything like that that we discussed today, it's important to know what your or feed based on your pet's ideal weight. So for instance, if I have a 40-pound dog and I know their ideal weight based on my vet doing probably these exact calculations we did today should be 35 pounds, what I want to do is feed my pet based on the feeding guidelines of 35 pounds. Because if I feed based on 40, it's automatically going to try to provide enough or is estimating this would provide enough calories to maintain the weight at 40 pounds. So you definitely want to go down a step in that guide and be able to do it. Again, the most exact way to do it is going to be going through those calculations we looked at today, figuring out exactly how much calories your pet will need to get to that target weight and make sure we are feeding based on that. Again, because every pet is going to be a little bit unique, you might need to recalibrate. So for instance, if you notice you did the calculation, you got 500 calories, for instance, and your pet is not losing or gaining weight, but maintaining, what you're going to want to maybe do is jump down a little bit, redo that calculation with a slightly lower K or constant that we looked at. So maybe you were previously doing 80. Maybe you want to drop it down to 70. Drop it down to 70, figure out how many calories that is, recalibrate how much you're feeding. About a week or two later, because with most pets you will see a quicker change, you could then kind of see, okay, has my pet lost any weight? If it's a smaller pet and a smaller amount of weight, you might need to wait a little bit longer just because most scales you might not be able to get down to the 0.05 if you're weighing your pet at home. But if you did bring your pet to a local CB Pet Market or Cherrybrook store, you can weigh them on the scale and get down to the 0.01 level to see even a smaller weight loss. If you do have a Chihuahua, for instance, maybe losing half a pound is super important to get to that ideal weight, where half a pound on a 100-pound dog is not going to make or break that dog's, ideal weight or body condition.
Okay. Lisa is asking if we can show the calculations again. I'm asking her which, because we had a bunch of different calculations. We
Yes.
showed. So I'm asking Lisa if she could chat in and let us know which calculations she wants to see again. She has an elderly dog with a good sized chest, so maybe it's a bulldog or a boxer. I'm not sure. And she didn't get it all down. You will be you will be getting the recording, but we could also probably send the individual slides maybe too, and that might be helpful. Do you think we can do that, Josh?
Yeah, that's definitely something we could do.
Okay.
Looking at that question, so how do you use that weight scale, I think is kind of the point.
Mhm.
So I'm going to go back to that visual representation. So even if you have a stockier pet, what you really want to look at or think about when looking at the visual representation is, can you see those ribs? Or are they still covered in fats? That's really when your touch assessment is going to become more valuable with those kind of stockier breeds. Where maybe your more muscular breeds, the visual assessment might become more important. So if you did have, a elderly pet that is a little bit stockier, has a larger, chest, don't pay too close attention to maybe how your pet looks compared to these pets, because it might look obese even though it's not. You're really going to want to think more about the details of it. So are the ribs super visible? Is there a little bit of fat over the ribs, or is there a lot of fat over the ribs? That's something that is going to become more important to help you figure out exactly where your pet is. Again, if you did have a question, you're not entirely sure, where your pet lands in the visual representation to come up with the number, you could always reach out, bring your pet to the local store. They could assist with that, as well as, if you did download the My Farmina app, you could make an appointment with a Farmina pet health coach, take photos of your pet directly in the app, upload it, and our team is more than happy to assist. Again, this is a complimentary service for any pet parent, whether you're feeding Farmina today or not. This is something you're able to participate in. We want to just make sure all pets are healthy, happy, and live long lives.
Okay. Let's see. I have one more question, and I guess it's kind of new. Is it okay to skip your pet's meals, like intermittent fasting in humans? Is there any benefit to that? Metabolic benefit?
So I don't think it's going to be the same effect that you'd have here. I think it's still up for debate more on the animal side. Just like, with humans, it's not maybe recommended for every person. Same with the pets. There's one side of the coin where, in nature, pets don't necessarily eat every day. They're not going to have a hunt or have prey on a daily basis. They do kind of eat a little bit less frequent. But at the same time, our pets today are not necessarily the same pet that would have been in the wild. Just through years of kind of evolution or kind of changes in their behavior, it is going to be a little bit different. It depends. If your pet is at their healthy weight, eating food every day, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But maybe if you did need to lose a little bit of weight or help with that, that is something you might want to think about. Something you also should recommend. I do recommend talking to your veterinarian about, just because if there are any other health issues, there could be some breed specific issues that might warrant, or your vet might recommend you not trying that. But that is something, again, that could vary a little bit, individual pet to individual pet.
Okay. I think we have time for one or two more questions.
Yeah.
Mark asks, do dogs gain weight after being spayed and also neutered? So I'm just adding neutered because we have to be fair.
Yes. So again, it's not every pet. It does vary. Typically pets, whether it's a dog or a cat, gaining weight after being spayed or neutered is more a factor, because a lot of times when that happens, their activity levels might decrease a bit. It's not that their metabolism isn't, I guess it is, their metabolism is also decreasing a little bit, just because they have lower levels of hormones in their body through the spaying and neutered process. But again, it could be a little bit more specific. Talking about my pet in particular, I have a Australian cattle dog. So she's a working dog, highly active. She got neutered, spayed, I should say. I don't know why I said neutered. She got spayed, and you know what? Her activity level has not gone down at all. So for us in particular, we are still feeding her that same amount of food. We did, after the procedure, I did spend a little bit more time closely monitoring her weight for a month or two, making sure that what we were feeding previously is still working well for her without gaining the weight. So in my case, there wasn't a significant weight change due to this being spayed or neutered for your pet potentially. But there are instances, a lot more, I think, on the cat side. You might notice a greater decrease in activity after that type of procedure.
Okay. That actually was our last question, and it is a little bit after 8. So if I'll give folks a second if there's another question that we have. If not, Josh, I'm just scrolling down to see if I missed anything. Hopefully, Lisa, you have the calculations now, and you'll be able to retrieve them when you get the recording. Tony wants to let you know that your shirt, you have a great shirt on.
Thank you.
You
Yes,
have your cat shirt on.
it's a cat face
Um,
shirt.
and then nope, those were all of the questions. If anybody participating this evening, if you come up with a question, during the evening or tomorrow and you want to, feel free. Karen is asking, are there any specific snacks that you would recommend for weight management?
So for weight management, what I'd recommend are going to be your lower calorie snacks. So your smaller treats, your smaller biscuits, different things like that, that are not going to contribute much, many calories. With on the weight management side for that type of pet, I don't recommend doing, a topper unless you're doing a wet food that might be designed for weight management purposes, or your snacks that are going to be a little bit higher quality, higher calorie, because with that pet, you really want to make sure that, because we're trying to reduce the amount of calories they're provided and really trying to be strict with their calorie intake, we want to make sure that the majority of that, the vast majority, is really coming from a complete food. So it's going to be complete, so that way we make sure that there's no other deficiencies or issues that might occur for that pet during this important time. But I do know, at times you might still need to reward your pet. So, depending on what food you're feeding and how food motivated, if you are able to maybe take some of their kibble out of the bowl, use that for treating, that's always a great option. Or, really taking a lower calorie treat, maybe splitting it into multiple pieces. So that way, again, we're able to give 4 or 5 treats to the pet with it still being a very low amount of food.
I'll add to that, a single ingredient treat like a
Yes.
freeze-dried chicken breast or turkey breast would be a good choice, because the chicken breast and the turkey breast you can break into smaller pieces. Pets don't really care how big how large the size of the treat is. They just know they're getting treated and it's coming from your hand into their mouth. That's the biggest reward that they could possibly get. And so those don't add a lot of calories, and it's a higher source of protein, something that is low in fat but higher in protein, a single ingredient treat. Maybe not a piece of liver, maybe just a piece of chicken breast, or turkey breast is good. Sometimes we have duck breast in the store. In our stores, we have freeze-dried single ingredient treats, readily available. And then if you wanted to, as far as a topper, if you wanted to add a little, bone broth is usually low in fat. If you wanted to add a little something, because you're feeding them a lower volume of food, perhaps you wanted to add a little bit to increase the volume in the bowl, a little bit of bone broth might be a good addition. Or goat milk is actually very, very low in fat. And just add a little bit of goat milk to their Farmina might be a good choice. So
Yeah. Another thing you could do, depending on how you kind of treat your pet, with a puppy where you're giving more treats while teaching versus maybe an older dog that got used to, hey, let me get this nighttime snack. It's 9 o'clock. Where's my treat kind of situation? Another thing you could even do is take, I found my dog really enjoyed this, and it works maybe a little better in the summer because you could do it outside. I would take some of the wet food, put it into an ice cube tray, add a little bit of that goat's milk that Claudia was mentioning before, and freeze it. And now I had little ice cube treats that I could give my pet. So during the summer, I'd go out back, I'd give her one of those. It kept her busy for a couple minutes. She loved it because it's cold, it's something different. Even though it's the same food I was putting mixing with her dry kibble, it was just a different kind of version of it. It came out of the fridge where she knows all of, let's say, the good food
All
is
the good
coming
human
from.
stuff comes from, right?
Yeah, and it's those little things, and she just went nuts with it and really loved it. And it was something I knew I was giving her that was healthy, it was complete, and it didn't, take away or add to her calorie intake.
Mhm. All right. Well, those are good suggestions. Okay. Everybody, thank you. I think we'll end it here. That was our last question. Thank you, Karen, for that really nice last question. And we will be getting this presentation out to you guys shortly. It will be in your inbox. And like I said, if you have any questions that we didn't get to, please feel free to email. I posted my email address, and I'll share everything with Josh, and between the Farmina Nutrition Center and Josh and I will get your questions answered. I think this was a great session. Thank you very much, Josh. I know this is a big issue and a big concern for a lot of pet owners. I know that it's weight management is an issue that our team in the stores talk about on a daily basis with our customers. So I want to thank you very much.
My
Everybody,
pleasure.
thank you for participating. Everybody have a wonderful, wonderful evening. And again, our thanks. Good night.
Thank you. Good
Good
night.
night.